First, we're going to get started with our pan boot camp. First thing I'm doing here is I'm getting my paint wet. Without water, I can't work with watercolor. But notice as I clean my brush, I wipe it, I blot it to make sure that I have a nice point to my bristles. Now we're going to go ahead and get started with gradient. Now a gradient is from light to dark. I'm going to go ahead and get the section wet first, and then I'm going to start to add some wet paint. Now the goal here is to, again, go from dark to light. You can see that I'm just kind of pulling the paint along into the rest of the water to try to get a light layer there on there first. I'm then going to add more dark or saturated color, and again start to pull that out into the lighter area as well. Now I will keep doing that until I feel like I have a gradual change from what I would consider darker paint to lighter paint. If you get any puddles, you can pick them kind of up with a dry-ish brush so that you don't have that darker area. Moving on to wet on wet, I need to get my section wet again because I'm going to be working with wet paint on top of wet paper. Try not to touch that gradient because you don't want to pull that paint into your wet on wet section. As soon as I have a puddle on my paper, I'm going to take my wet paint and I'm just going to start to kind of leave drips behind, and the colors will start to mix and blend together because the paint is allowed to kind of free flow wherever it would like to go. This can make some really interesting areas within a painting, but it is something that you don't have a whole lot of control over. Feel free to kind of play around with color choices. I'm kind of sticking to my red, blue, and violet color scheme here in all of these videos. Moving on to dry brush, I'm going to grab my smaller brush and work with it relatively dry. My paint still needs to be wet, but I'm just going to do some hatching or even some cross-hatching motions within that section. Now, dry brush is an excellent way to start to kind of think about texture when you are starting to add paint. That concludes what we're going to talk about in this video. You are now going to move on to looking at how to work a little bit more with some different materials to create different textures